Welcome traders, and today we're going to look at plotting the different trend lines. So trend lines, abbreviated to TL, is a very common tool used within the Forex realm of technical analysis. They're probably one of the most underrated tools and probably one of the tools that a lot of traders get wrong. But obviously if you draw it out correctly and pinpoint it onto the chart correctly, then it does provide great opportunities for traders to enter the market. So the basic features of a trend line is being able to identify the dynamic areas of support and resistance. So in this scenario here that we have here on Euro USD on the 4 hour, we can see that we are in fact trending up. So we're going to be plotting a ascending trend line. And we want to locate all of the bottoms of the wicks, but you want to draw a line of best fit to actually locate a dynamic area of support, like so. And in this case, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 points of this trend line to the upside in this scenario. In this scenario, we'll have a descending trend line. So I'm going to take the point of the wick there and move it down to here. So we have 0.1, 0.2, 0.3. And we did in fact get a breakout, which I'll cover shortly. But essentially that is a descending trend line, and we're looking to locate the dynamic areas of resistance. Another note to consider when drawing trend lines is that, for example, this trend line that we can see here, the more touches or points on the actual trend line usually indicates the more strength a trend line actually has when actually using this trend line in future to trade off it or use it as a potential breakout setup, and it's going to show how respected it is within the actual price action of the chart that you're looking at. So we generally have methods and ways that we actually look out for certain trend line setups to actually provide us with entry points, stop losses and targets, depending on how they correlate with all of the other technical analysis, such as moving averages and Fibonacci, for example. So here we're going to identify the actual breakout setup and how to identify it in order to actually find the entry point. And it often leads most frequently to the actual entry point within a trend, looking for more short-term breaks, etc. But we'll just explain what a simple breakout pattern is, and how to identify the confirmation with the liquid fluctuation that we can actually see. So if we have a look here, and if I was to plot on just a simple ascending trend line, so we've got 0.1, 0.2, and then we've got 0.3, we've just had a breakout. And I'm going to mark this area here, so I'm just going to take this as an overall breakout. We've had, after the breakout, in most cases we await the retest back to the trend line, and then once we break the initial breakout and this candle here closes below the overall support, this will then actually provide us with an entry point to trade in that certain direction. For example here, short or sell, looking for 0.1 of trend line, and then ideally usually looking for the next low, in this case in a downtrend. So as mentioned, you're going to be looking for other different tools and confluences that you can actually use in combination with trend lines to get the best setups. But ideally you want to be looking for your entry point beyond the breakout of the initial break. With stops, in this case you'd probably want to put your stop above the lower swing high here, basically the retest. Obviously if the market was to drive above that level, then you'd probably want to be out of the market if you are going short, and then targets would either be 0.1 of trend line or into the next low or high, depending on the certain trend that you're trading in. So as we know a brief bit about trend line breakouts, we can actually then go on to identify what a counter trend line is. Now in this situation here, the market has come all the way up, and we can see the 1, 2, 3, 4th bounce here, and we'd be able to get a counter trend line. Now a counter trend line basically goes in the counter direction of the overall trend line, but it does actually provide good entry points when we're looking for bounces. Now the bounce here, we can use a counter trend line to identify the bounce, otherwise there'd be a breakout. So in this case here, we can actually plot on a counter trend line here, identifying the dynamic areas of resistance. We can actually hop down to the hourly. We have been analysing on the 4 hour, so if we drop to the hourly chart, we can get a little bit more clarity. And here we can just use the line of best fit to actually identify where all of these highs are placed. So we can see here 0.1, overall 0.2, 0.3, and then we did in fact break at 0.4. Got a little bit choppy around here, but we can see a small minor break, retest, and then a continuation. So possibly entering long above a close of this wick here would in fact create a sufficient buy setup, which we can then target 0.1 of trend line, which we did in fact come all the way up to, and then potentially even higher depending on the certain trend or trade setup. Again, using the same scenario on Euro USD, this ascending trend line. Another trend line tactic that you can actually use within the market is inner trend lines. Inner trend lines just provide more of a short-term trade bias when it comes to identifying the bigger scale trend line. So we can see here the overall trend line with 5 points. I can actually plot on an inner trend line from, let's say, 0.3, and then we can actually scale it all the way up to these lows here. So if we were to go to the bottom of this wick here, we can actually see a trend line breakout. Now these, obviously this is going to be another ascending trend line because we're going within the uptrend, but we can actually trade these breakout points here. So this breakout point towards the actual overall trend line once we get those breakouts here. So we can actually identify more trade opportunities within inner trend lines as well, and these work for descending trend lines as well in a downtrend. Now using inner trend lines comes with practice and chart time, but basically what you want to be looking for is to use a combination of short-term, intermediate term and long-term combined into the same sort of analysis or trade direction, by plotting those inner trend lines in order to get more good opportunities and find more functional entry points when it comes to identifying where the market is going to be going. But in most of the time, you want to be trading within the overall trade direction of the bigger trend, i.e. the daily, weekly and also monthly chart. So here on the Euro USD, I've flicked back to the daily, and we can actually see a bit of a counter trend line in play here. So on the daily, if you look at the long term price action, we are in fact in an uptrend with the higher highs, higher lows, higher highs, higher lows, etc. But if you was to actually place on a counter trend line within this trade bias here, we can actually use the top of these wicks here, and we can actually see a initial breakout, a retest, and now a continuation above the initial break on Euro USD here. So it's a good tool to use even in long-term situations when we're looking for counter trend lines. We can use it in correlation with the moving averages here. The moving averages have crossed to the upside and are pointing higher now, which is indicating more bullish momentum to come within this price action here. So that's it for trend lines. Stay tuned for more videos to come.